Hi you guys, it's Nikki Lene back with another quick chat, and today we're talking about some tips to improve your communication with providers. Tip number one, think about the supporting information that you're going to need and have it handy. Now, if I'm calling a provider about my patient's blood pressure, I'm going to want to know the supporting details, like what the blood pressure is right now, what the last blood pressures were before it, maybe 2 or 3 back, as well as something that shows a trend. If a person's blood pressure is elevated, I want to know how long it's been elevated, or was there something that caused the elevation? So make sure you have all of that information kind of together because you already know the provider is going to ask for it. Another thing I would say is that if you don't know what the provider is going to ask, call them close to a computer so that you can look the information up and you can quickly reference any lab values, any diagnostic imaging, or anything else that they may need you to look up really quickly to get them some answers. Next, as a new nurse, when you get to the R portion of the SBAR, which we talked about in our last video, and you don't feel comfortable making recommendations, that's okay. Sometimes as a new nurse, we kind of get this little intuition or butterfly feeling in our stomach that something's wrong, but we don't know what it is. So what you can do is gather the information that you do have, present it to the provider, and just let them know that you have overall concerns and you'd like to get eyes on this patient. We're not expected to know everything as new nurses, although we kind of sometimes put that pressure on ourselves. It's just not realistic. But there are times where we are just going to have a gut feeling that something's not right. And I'll give you an example. When I was a new nurse, I had a patient who was septic. Now, when I looked at this patient, I did not know what the heck was going on with him. I can just tell based off of my assessment at the beginning of the shift and 2 to 3 hours in, he just didn't look like he was doing good. So one by one, he started getting these critical values that were coming back, literally one lab at a time. And I was calling the provider, and every time I called the provider, I let them know, I just don't feel right about this. Something's not right. I would really like for you to get eyes on this patient. And the provider kept blowing me off over and over again. But with each phone call, I kept voicing my concern every time I called for critical values. And come to find out, yeah, the patient was really sick. He was exceptionally septic and not doing too well, but I didn't know exactly what was going on. But I did voice my concerns, and I did let that provider know that the patient didn't look good. And eventually that provider came down and put eyes on that patient, and that combined with the lab work made a big difference. Next tip is whenever you're getting orders, ask for parameters. Now, whenever providers put in orders, sometimes they'll just put in very basic parameters, but you want to find out the parameters of when should I call you back. If a provider makes a recommendation for a blood pressure medication, you want to know what goal we're trying to hit with that blood pressure medication and when should I be concerned enough to call you back for maybe another order. When we are treating a problem, we have to know specifically what the problem is, what the normal parameters are, what that patient's parameters are per se, because sometimes the patient's parameters are going to be different than our nursing norms. But we want to know more specifically, what are the parameters for this medication that I'm administering and what I'm looking for. If you don't know parameters, then you're not going to know when to call the provider back and when you should be concerned enough to take the situation to the next level. So always ask for parameters and repeat them back at the end of the conversation. Repeat the orders back. All right, I'm going to give this medication and I will call you back if the systolic blood pressure does not maintain above 80, or if the person's breathing is below 10 breaths per minute, or if the person's urine output is less than 100 cc's an hour. Just so you're verifying that you and that provider are on the same page and that you are ready and willing to escalate it and call that provider back if that intervention didn't work and you guys have to brainstorm on the next one. Thanks for joining me for another quick chat, you guys. I look forward to talking to you guys in the next one.